Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him and could not believe what he was seeing. The radar showed objects moving toward Earth that were bigger than anything humans had ever built. He was the commander of Guardian Station, a military base that floated in space above Earth, and his job was to watch for dangers coming from the stars. For 30 years he had looked at empty space. Today was different. The objects moved slowly but with purpose. They were not rocks or space junk. Someone or something was controlling them. Jake called his team to the command center. Lisa Hayes arrived first. She was Earth's best scientist when it came to studying life from other worlds, even though no one had ever found any before today. Peter Collins came next. He was a doctor and engineer who understood alien technology better than anyone, which was strange since alien technology had never existed until now. The ships that approached Earth were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. They seemed to be made of crystal and light. They moved without making any noise that human sensors could detect. When they got close enough, one of the ships sent a message to Guardian Station. The message came in perfect English, which should have been impossible. A voice spoke from the ship. It was soft and musical like wind through trees. The voice said its name was Veltar and that it came from a place called the Andromeda Galaxy. Veltar said his people were called the Cathara, and they had traveled for thousands of years looking for other thinking beings. They had finally found humans, and they were very happy about this. Jake looked at Lisa and Peter. None of them knew what to say. Lisa spoke first. She asked Veltar why the Cathara had come so far to find other life. The alien voice answered that his people believed all thinking beings should help each other. They had gifts to share with humans, wonderful things that would make life on Earth much better. Peter asked what kind of gifts. Veltar explained that the Cathara had technology that could give humans unlimited clean energy. They had medicine that could cure any disease. They had ways to grow food that would end hunger forever. All they wanted in return was permission to build a few small research stations on Earth where they could study human culture and share knowledge. Jake felt suspicious, but he could not say why. Everything Veltar said sounded too good to be true. When things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. But what if this time was different? What if the universe really did contain beings who wanted to help humanity? The first Cathara ship landed in Switzerland 3 days later. Veltar stepped out of the ship, and cameras from around the world watched. He was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to glow with its own light. His eyes were large and kind. He spoke to the leaders of Earth's governments through translators that his people had made. The translators were small devices that could turn any language into any other language instantly. Within a week, the Cathara had given humans their first gift. It was an energy core the size of a basketball that could power an entire city. Scientists tested it and found that it produced no pollution and would never run out of power. The device seemed to create energy from nothing, which should have been impossible, but it worked perfectly. Lisa worked with the Cathara scientists to understand their medical technology. They had scanners that could look inside a human body and find problems that human doctors would miss. They had medicines that could fix these problems in hours instead of months. When they tested their medicine on volunteers, people with cancer were cured completely. People who had been sick their whole lives became healthy for the first time. President Maria Rodriguez announced to the world that humanity had entered a new golden age. The Cathara had brought gifts that would solve most of the problems that had troubled humans for centuries. There would be no more energy shortages, no more incurable diseases, no more hunger. Earth's people celebrated in the streets, but Steve Parker was not celebrating. He was the head of Earth Defense Intelligence, and his job was to find threats to humanity before they became dangerous. Something about the Cathara worried him, though he could not explain what it was. They were too perfect, too generous, too good to be true. Parker put his best people to work studying everything about the aliens. He told them to watch where the Cathara built their research stations and what they did there. He ordered his teams to monitor all communications between the aliens and Earth's governments. He wanted to know if the Cathara were hiding anything. Nicole Red was Parker's top agent, and she was very good at finding secrets. She noticed that every Kithara research station was built near a major city. The aliens said this was because they wanted to study human culture, but Nicole thought there might be another reason. She also noticed that the alien ships sent messages into deep space every night, but Earth scientists could not understand what these messages said. Tony Martinez was an engineer who worked on the alien energy cores. He was amazed by how well they worked, but he was also puzzled by how complex they were inside. The cores had thousands of tiny parts that human technology could not make. Some of these parts seemed to serve no purpose at all. Martinez wondered why the aliens would build something so complicated when a simpler design would work just as well. As weeks passed, more Kithara ships arrived at Earth. The aliens built 12 research stations and shared more of their technology. Human scientists learned to make new medicines and better ways to grow food. The world became a better place to live, just as Veltar had promised. But Parker's teams kept finding strange things. They discovered that some of the alien technology could not be copied by human factories. The Kithara said this was because human manufacturing was not advanced enough yet, but they promised to teach humans how to build the machines they needed. Parker wondered why beings who had traveled across the galaxy to help humanity would not share all their knowledge at once. Late one night, Parker stood in his office looking at reports from around the world. Everything showed that the Kithara were exactly what they claimed to be. They were peaceful explorers who wanted to help humanity. They had brought incredible gifts and asked for almost nothing in return. They were making Earth a paradise. So, why did Steve Parker feel like something terrible was about to happen? 6 months had passed since the Kithara arrived on Earth, and the world had changed in ways that seemed impossible. Cities that had struggled with power shortages now had more energy than they could use. Hospitals that had been full of dying patients were nearly empty because the alien medicine could cure almost everything. Farms that had barely grown enough food were now producing 3 times as much as before. Amy Sullivan worked in the biggest Kithara research center, which was built in New Geneva. She was a scientist who studied how the human brain worked, and the aliens had asked her to help them with something they called consciousness enhancement technology. They said this technology could make humans smarter and happier by removing negative thoughts and violent feelings. Amy found the work fascinating but strange. The Kithara seemed very interested in the parts of the human brain that controlled anger, fear, and the desire to fight. They asked many questions about why humans felt these emotions and what would happen if these feelings were reduced or removed completely. Amy explained that these emotions had helped humans survive for millions of years, but the aliens seemed puzzled by this idea. Meanwhile, Steve Parker's investigation into the Kithara had grown larger and more secret. He now had agents watching every alien research station and monitoring all communications between the Kithara and Earth's governments. What his people were finding made Parker very worried, but he could not prove that anything illegal or dangerous was happening. Nicole Reed had gotten a job at the Kithara research station in the Amazon rainforest. She pretended to be a simple translator, but she was actually Parker's best spy. The work at this station was supposed to be about studying plant life, but Nicole discovered that the aliens were doing something very different. The Kithara were bringing human volunteers to the Amazon station for what they called advanced medical treatment. These volunteers went into the station healthy and came out healthier, but Nicole noticed that they also came out changed. They spoke more softly, smiled more often, and never seemed to get angry about anything. When Nicole talked to these people, they said they felt wonderful and that the Kithara treatment had made them better people, but Nicole saw something else. These treated humans were very easy to convince to do things. If a Kithara asked them to work extra hours, they agreed immediately. If a Kithara suggested they move to a different city, they packed their bags without question. It was as if the treatment had made them unable to say no to anything the aliens wanted. Tony Martinez had been studying the alien energy cores for months, and he had made a discovery that kept him awake at night. Hidden deep inside each energy core were thousands of tiny devices that served no purpose in creating power. At first, Tony thought these devices were just leftover parts from the manufacturing process, but when he studied them more carefully, he realized they were something else entirely. The tiny devices were designed to reverse the function of the energy core. Instead of creating power, they could drain power from everything connected to them. If these devices were activated, every energy core on Earth would stop working and start pulling electricity out of human cities instead. The result would be a complete power failure that would plunge the entire world into darkness. Tony brought his discovery to Peter Collins, who had been working with the Kithara medical technology. Peter had found something equally disturbing. The alien medicines that cured human diseases also made tiny changes to human DNA. These changes were so small that most scientists would not notice them, but Peter had very good equipment and was very careful about his work. The DNA changes appeared to make humans more susceptible to certain types of brain chemistry alterations. Peter realized that someone who had been treated with Kithara medicine would be much easier to control using drugs or other medical treatments. The alien medicine was not just curing diseases. It was preparing human bodies to be controlled by. Whoever understood how the DNA changes worked, Peter tried to publish his findings in scientific journals, but something strange happened. Every time he submitted his research, the computers would lose his data. His funding for the research was suddenly cut by the university. Other scientists who had been working with him were transferred to different projects or offered jobs in other countries. When Peter tried to talk to his colleagues about what was happening, he found that many of them had volunteered for the Kithara Consciousness Enhancement Program. These scientists told Peter that his research was obviously wrong because the Kithara would never do anything to hurt humans. They suggested that Peter should volunteer for the program himself because it would help him think more clearly and be less paranoid. Parker's team of codebreakers had been working day and night to understand the messages that Kithara's ships sent into space. The alien communications were protected by encryption that was more advanced than anything humans had ever seen. For months, the codebreakers made no progress at all. Then Jenny Foster, who was the best codebreaker in Parker's organization, found a weakness in the alien encryption. She discovered that the Kithara were using mathematical principles that were similar to human mathematics but more advanced. By working backward from the similarities, Jenny was able to break small pieces of the alien code. What she found made everyone in Parker's organization feel sick with fear. The messages the aliens were sending were not communications with their homeworld. They were progress reports to a larger fleet of ships that was hiding somewhere in the outer solar system. The Kithara on Earth were not explorers or scientists. They were advanced scouts for an invasion force. The decoded messages called Earth's human population the Harvest and referred to the Kithara mission as soft subjugation. The aliens had done this same thing to dozens of other worlds. They would arrive with gifts and promises of friendship, slowly take control of the native population using medicine and technology, and then strip the planet of all its resources. While using the controlled natives as slaves, the messages revealed that the Kithara had a specific timeline. They needed 18 months to prepare Earth's human population for complete control. After that, the main invasion fleet would arrive to begin the harvest phase. According to the decoded messages, Earth was right on schedule, and the Kithara were very pleased with how easily humans had accepted their gifts. Parker realized that humanity had perhaps 6 months left before the aliens sprang their trap. The problem was that most of Earth's governments and scientific institutions had been infiltrated by the Kithara or were run by humans who had received the consciousness enhancement treatment. If Parker tried to warn the world openly, he would be dismissed as a paranoid troublemaker. Even worse, many of the people Parker needed to convince had already been treated with Kithara medicine. Their altered DNA made them more likely to trust the aliens and less likely to believe evidence of alien deception. The Kithara had been very clever about which humans they treated first. They had focused on government leaders, military commanders, scientists, and journalists. Parker began secretly contacting people who had refused Kithara treatment and who worked in positions where they could potentially fight back against the aliens. He started gathering weapons and supplies that did not depend on alien technology. He identified places where human resistance fighters could hide if the aliens took control of Earth's major cities, but as Parker looked at the size of the task ahead of him, he realized that humanity was probably doomed. The Kithara had been planning their conquest for centuries and had refined their techniques on dozens of other worlds. They had given humans gifts that were actually tools of control, and most humans were too grateful and trusting to see the trap that was closing around them. The only advantage Parker could think of was that the Kithara seemed to underestimate human creativity and stubbornness. Their reports described humans as being similar to other species they had conquered, but Parker suspected the aliens might be wrong about that. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters by being more adaptable and more willing to fight than any other species on Earth. If the Kithara thought they could control humanity the same way they had controlled other alien species, they might be in for a surprise. But Parker knew that surprise would not be enough. Humanity needed a plan, and they needed it soon. The day the Kithara revealed their true purpose began like any other day, but it would end with human civilization in ruins and millions of people under alien control. It was the first anniversary of contact between humans and the Kithara, and celebrations were planned in every major city on Earth. World leaders had gathered in Geneva for a special ceremony where Veltar would announce the next phase of cooperation between the two species. Steve Parker watched the ceremony from his secret command center deep underground. He had spent the last 6 months preparing for this day, building a network of resistance fighters and gathering supplies that did not depend on Kithara technology. Parker knew the aliens would make their move soon, but he had hoped to have more time to prepare. At exactly noon Geneva time, Veltar stepped up to speak to the assembled world leaders and the billions of humans watching on television. He smiled in the way that had made humans trust him for a year, and his voice was as warm and friendly as always. He said that humanity had proven itself ready for the next phase of their relationship with the Kithara, and that the time had come for humans to take their place in the greater galactic community. As Veltar spoke these words, every piece of Kithara technology on Earth activated hidden functions that no human had known existed. The energy cores that powered human cities reversed their operation and began draining electricity instead of providing it. Within minutes, every major city on Earth was plunged into darkness as power grids overloaded and failed. The medical nanobots that millions of humans had received as part of their treatment activated and began releasing chemicals into their bloodstreams. These chemicals made people calm and compliant, unable to feel anger or resist suggestions from authority figures. In hospitals, government buildings, and military bases around the world, humans who had been treated with Kithara medicine suddenly became willing servants of their alien benefactors. The agricultural enhancers that had tripled Earth's food production released toxins into the soil that would poison any crops that had not yet been harvested. The Kithara wanted humanity to be dependent on them for food as well as energy and medicine. Within days, Earth would face massive food shortages that only the aliens could solve, but Parker's resistance network was ready. For months, they had been operating from hardened bunkers and using only pre-contact human technology. When the Kithara attack began, Parker's people were the only organized military force on Earth that remained under human control. Beth Adams led the first counterattack. She was a colonel in the Earth Defense Force who had refused all Kithara medical treatment and had helped Parker identify other soldiers who could be trusted. Adams led her teams to the Kithara research stations in North America, using explosives and conventional weapons to destroy the alien facilities before the Kithara could organize their defenses. The aliens were shocked by the speed and violence of the human response. They had conquered dozens of other species using the same techniques, and none of those species had been able to mount any significant resistance. The Kithara had assumed that humans would react like other intelligent beings and would submit peacefully once they realized they had been defeated. Instead, humans attacked with a fury that the aliens could not understand. Rick Turner coordinated resistance activities around the world using radio communications and coded messages to help human fighters organize attacks on Cathara positions. The aliens controlled most of the world's communications networks, but Turner's people used old equipment and clever tactics to stay in contact with each other. The resistance captured several Cathara data storage devices during their attacks, and Parker's technical team worked around the clock to extract information from them. What they found confirmed their worst fears but also gave them hope. Earth was just one of many worlds that the Cathara had conquered using identical techniques. But the aliens had never faced resistance as fierce as what humans were providing. Amy Sullivan had escaped from the Geneva Research Center when the Cathara revealed their true nature. She brought with her detailed information about the consciousness enhancement technology that the aliens had been developing. Amy explained to Parker that the Cathara technology worked by suppressing the parts of the brain that controlled aggression, fear, and independent thought. The aliens had assumed that all intelligent species would want to eliminate these traits because they caused conflict and unhappiness. They had never encountered a species that considered aggression and independence to be valuable characteristics worth preserving. This fundamental misunderstanding of human nature was the reason why their standard conquest techniques were failing on Earth. Meanwhile, more Cathara ships were arriving from space to reinforce the invasion. The aliens had not expected to need military support to complete their conquest of Earth, but human resistance was forcing them to change their plans. The new ships brought weapons and soldiers instead of scientists and administrators. The Cathara began systematically destroying human cities that showed signs of resistance. They used energy weapons that could level entire city blocks and deployed flying machines that hunted down individual human fighters. The aliens also began executing human prisoners in public to demonstrate the price of resistance, but every act of alien brutality only made humans fight harder. Parker realized that the Cathara had made a critical error in their approach to conquering humanity. They had spent a year studying human culture, but they had only looked at the peaceful aspects of human civilization. They had not understood that humans were capable of incredible violence when threatened. The resistance learned to use the aliens' own technology against them. Nicole Reed's team captured a Cathara communication device and used it to spread false orders that confused alien forces. Tony Martinez figured out how to reprogram the medical nanobots so they would attack Cathara biology instead of controlling human behavior. Jenny Foster created computer viruses that turned the aliens' translation systems into weapons of psychological warfare. As weeks passed, the conflict settled into a brutal stalemate. The Cathara controlled most of Earth's major cities and had millions of mind-controlled humans working for them, but they could not eliminate the human resistance. Every time they destroyed one resistance base, two more would appear. Every time they killed a group of human fighters, more humans would volunteer to take their place. The aliens began to realize that they had encountered something they had never faced before. Other species had surrendered when conquest became inevitable, but humans seemed to prefer death to slavery. The Cathara had weapons that could destroy all life on Earth, but that would defeat the purpose of their invasion. They needed human workers and Earth's resources, not a dead planet. Parker's intelligence network discovered that the main Cathara fleet was using Earth's moon as a hidden staging area. The aliens had been building a massive base on the far side of the moon where human telescopes could not see it. This base contained not only the ships and supplies needed to complete Earth's conquest, but also the fleets intended to conquer the next dozen worlds on the Cathara target list. The discovery gave Parker an idea that was so dangerous it bordered on insanity. If humanity could destroy the lunar base, they could cripple the entire Cathara invasion force. The aliens would lose not only their ability to complete Earth's conquest, but also their plans to expand further into human space. The problem was that attacking the lunar base would require every ship and soldier that humanity had left. It would be a suicide mission with almost no chance of success. Even if the attack succeeded, most of the human participants would die in the process. Parker called together the leaders of the resistance from around the world. He explained the situation and presented his plan. The room was quiet for a long time as everyone considered what he was proposing. Finally, Beth Adams spoke for all of them. She said that humans had already lost everything that mattered. Their civilization was in ruins, their governments had been destroyed, and their people were being turned into slaves. If they were going to die as a species, they should at least try to take their enemies with them. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would make one final, desperate attack on the Kithara lunar base. They would use every weapon they had and sacrifice everything they could to strike back at the aliens who had tried to deceive them with false peace. The human resistance had transformed from a desperate intelligence operation into something the Kithara had never encountered before, a species that became more dangerous the closer it came to extinction. In hidden bases scattered across Earth, humans prepared for what they knew would be their final battle. They had learned to fight dirty, to use weapons the aliens considered primitive, and to employ tactics that no civilized species would ever attempt. Sam Johnson commanded what remained of Earth's space fleet from an asteroid mining station that had been converted into a military base. The ships under his command were a mix of old military vessels, converted cargo haulers, and civilian craft that had been hastily armed with whatever weapons could be found. They were no match for Kithara technology in a fair fight, but Johnson had no intention of fighting fairly. His strategy was based on something the aliens could not understand: the human willingness to die for a cause. Johnson's pilots flew ships loaded with nuclear warheads directly into Kithara vessels, detonating their weapons at point-blank range. They used ramming attacks that destroyed both ships but gave humans a favorable exchange rate. They deployed mines and booby traps that turned space around Earth into a deadly maze for alien ships. The Kithara tried to adapt to human tactics, but they were fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. When the aliens increased their ship armor, humans developed weapons that attacked from inside the ships. When the Kithara improved their shields, humans found ways to slip small craft through the barriers and detonate explosives within the shield. Perimeter, on Earth's surface, the war had become even more brutal. Dana White led urban warfare specialists who turned human cities into death traps for Kithara ground forces. They used the aliens' own technology against them, reprogramming captured devices to serve human purposes. They created weapons from common materials that could be found in any city, making it impossible for the aliens to cut off their supply lines. White's fighters learned that Kithara biology was optimized for their peaceful conquest strategy. The aliens had weak immune systems because they had never needed to resist biological warfare. They had limited tolerance for stress because their usual enemies surrendered quickly. Their nervous systems shut down when exposed to extreme violence. Because they had evolved to be conquerors, not warriors, this knowledge led to the development of new tactics that exploited Kithara weaknesses. Human fighters used biological weapons created from Earth bacteria that the aliens could not resist. They employed psychological warfare techniques that overloaded alien nervous systems. They created environments of constant extreme violence. That made it impossible for Kithara forces to function effectively. The turning point came when Alan Cooper's Special Forces unit captured a Kithara command ship that had been damaged during an attack on the lunar base supply lines. The ship contained detailed intelligence about alien operations, including the location and layout of the main staging area on the moon's far side. More importantly, the ship contained Kithara prisoners, and Cooper's interrogation team quickly discovered that the aliens had never experienced anything like human methods of extracting information. The Kithara had no resistance to torture because no other species they had conquered had been willing to use such techniques. Within days, the humans had learned everything they needed to know about the lunar base's defenses and operations. The intelligence revealed that the moon base was far larger than anyone had suspected. The Kithara had been building there for over a year, constructing not just a staging area for Earth's conquest, but a major fleet assembly facility. The base contained ships and equipment intended for the conquest of dozens of other worlds. making it the most important Kithara military installation in this part of the galaxy. Jenny, Foster's technical team used the captured alien equipment to create a computer virus that could spread through Kithara networks. The virus was designed to disable alien weapons and communication systems at a critical moment during the planned attack. It would give the human assault force a brief window of opportunity, but the timing would have to be perfect. Tony Martinez worked with the Resistance's engineering teams to modify every available human spacecraft for the lunar assault. They stripped out everything that was not essential and loaded the ships with as many weapons and explosives as they could carry. Many of the ships were converted into flying bombs that could be guided into important targets, the plan that emerged from weeks of desperate preparation was ambitious beyond anything humans had ever attempted. The entire remaining human space fleet would launch a coordinated attack on the lunar base, using every trick and tactic they had developed during months of guerrilla warfare. The attack would be supported by simultaneous strikes on Kithara positions around Earth, designed to prevent alien reinforcements from reaching the moon. Parker knew that the plan had little chance of success. The Kithara had superior numbers, better technology, and defensive positions that should have been impregnable. But he also knew that humans had advantages the aliens did not understand. They were fighting for their survival as a species, and they were willing to sacrifice everything to achieve victory. The night before the attack, Parker addressed the assembled resistance fighters via encrypted radio communication. He told them that tomorrow they would either win their freedom or die trying, but either outcome was better than living as slaves to alien masters. He reminded them that every human who had ever lived had faced impossible odds and had somehow found a way to survive. This was their test, and they would not fail. Beth Adams commanded the ground assault teams that would attack Kithara positions on Earth, while the main force struck the lunar base. Her mission was to keep the aliens too busy to organize an effective defense of their moon base. She would have to hold out against overwhelming odds for as long as possible. Knowing that her forces were unlikely to survive the night, Billy Ross led the boarding parties that would attempt to capture and destroy key facilities within the lunar base. His teams were equipped with the deadliest weapons humans could devise, including nuclear devices that could be manually detonated if the mission failed. They were prepared to fight their way to the base's command center and destroy it even if it meant their own deaths. Kate Morgan coordinated the kamikaze attacks that would target the most heavily defended parts of the alien base. Her pilots had volunteered for suicide missions, loading their ships with radioactive materials and conventional explosives. They would ram their vessels into critical alien installations, trading their lives for maximum damage to the enemy. As the human fleet assembled for the final attack, everyone involved understood that they were participating in the last desperate act of their species. If the mission failed, there would be no second chance. The Kithara would complete their conquest of Earth, and humanity would join the dozens of other species that had become slaves to the alien empire. But if the mission succeeded, if humans could destroy the lunar base and cripple the Kithara invasion force, then maybe their species would survive. Maybe Earth's children would grow up free instead of living as servants to alien masters. Maybe the galaxy would learn that humans were not easy prey for would-be conquerors. The attack began at dawn, Earth time, with simultaneous strikes on Kithara positions around the globe. As explosions lit up the sky above every major city, the human space fleet launched from hidden bases and began its journey to the moon. They carried with them the hopes and fury of their entire species. Determined to show the universe that humanity would not go quietly into slavery, the Battle of Luna was about to begin, and its outcome would determine whether humans remained free or spent the rest of their existence serving alien masters. Either way, the Kithara were about to learn what happened when they tried to deceive humanity with promises of peace. The Battle of Luna began with the largest military operation in human history, as every surviving warship, transport, and armed civilian craft launched toward the moon in a desperate final assault. The Kithara detected the approaching fleet hours before it arrived, but they made a critical mistake in their response. They assumed the humans were attempting a conventional military attack that could be defeated with superior technology and numbers. Instead, what reached the lunar base was something the aliens had never encountered, an entire species that had chosen death over slavery. The human ships did not attempt to engage the Cathara fleet in traditional combat. They flew directly into the alien formations, detonating nuclear warheads and ramming larger vessels with cargo ships loaded with explosives. The humans traded their lives at a rate that horrified the aliens and achieved tactical results that should have been impossible. Billy Ross led the first boarding parties to reach the lunar surface, using modified mining equipment to burn through the base's outer hull. His teams fought with a savagery that the Cathara could not comprehend, using flamethrowers, explosives, and hand weapons in the tight corridors of the alien facility. When Ross ran out of ammunition, he continued fighting with knives and improvised clubs, refusing to retreat even when his position became hopeless. The Cathara had never faced an enemy that fought harder when the situation became more desperate. Their own psychology was based on calculated surrender when victory became unlikely, but humans seemed to become more dangerous as their chances of survival decreased. Alien soldiers found themselves facing enemies who would detonate grenades rather than be captured, who would continue attacking even when mortally wounded, and who seemed to prefer mutual destruction to defeat. Kate Morgan's kamikaze squadrons struck the most heavily defended sections of the lunar base with a precision that came from months of careful planning and the willingness to die for their cause. Her pilots flew ships loaded with radioactive waste directly into the base's power generation facilities, creating contamination zones that would remain lethal for decades. They targeted command centers, communication arrays, and weapons installations, with suicide attacks that traded human lives for critical damage to alien capabilities. The psychological effect on the Cathara was devastating. They had conquered dozens of worlds using techniques based on their understanding of rational behavior. But humans were not behaving rationally. They were fighting like cornered animals, showing no regard for their own survival and no willingness to negotiate even when defeat seemed certain. Sam Johnson commanded the space battle from his flagship, coordinating attacks that used every dirty trick humans had learned during months of guerrilla warfare. His ships launched clouds of debris that confused alien sensors, used nuclear mines to create radiation barriers, and employed electronic warfare systems that jammed Cathara communications. When his own ship was crippled by alien fire, Johnson manually piloted it into the largest enemy vessel, detonating both ships in an explosion that could be seen from Earth. The turning point came when Jenny Foster's computer virus activated throughout the Cathara network. For 10 crucial minutes, alien weapon systems malfunctioned, communication networks failed, and defensive barriers collapsed. During this window, human assault teams penetrated deep into the lunar base and began destroying critical installations from within. Tony Martinez had discovered during his study of alien technology that the Cathara power systems were vulnerable to a specific type of electromagnetic pulse. He had spent weeks building a device that could generate this pulse, and he carried it personally into the heart of the lunar base. When he activated the device, it caused a chain reaction that destroyed the base's primary power grid and left much of the facility in darkness, but the humans paid a terrible price for their success. Beth Adams died holding a corridor against overwhelming alien forces, buying time for evacuation teams to escape with critical intelligence. Rick Turner was killed when his command post took a direct hit from a Cathara energy weapon. Dana White fell leading an assault on an alien stronghold, taking dozens of enemies with her when she detonated a nuclear device. The final phase of the battle centered on the base's command complex, where the Cathara leadership had barricaded themselves behind their most advanced defenses. Lisa Hayes, who had studied alien biology since first contact, led a team carrying biological weapons specifically designed to target Cathara physiology. The aliens had no defense against Earth bacteria that had been modified using their own medical technology. The command complex fell. The humans discovered the true scope of the Cathara operation. The lunar base was not just a staging area for Earth's conquest, but the central hub for an empire. that spanned multiple star systems. The aliens had been refugees from a dying galaxy, desperately seeking new worlds they could convert into homes for their species. Earth was meant to be their new capital, the center of a rebuilt civilization based on enslaved alien labor. Alan Cooper found Veltar himself in the deepest bunker of the command complex, surrounded by the last of his personal guard. The alien, who had promised humanity friendship and prosperity, was revealed as the architect of genocide on a galactic scale. Cooper's team captured the alien leader alive, intending to extract information about other Cathara operations, but they discovered that Veltar carried a device that would destroy the entire lunar base if activated. The alien leader offered a final negotiation. He would deactivate the device and allow the surviving humans to live if they would agree to a partial surrender. The Cathara would leave Earth but would be allowed to establish colonies on uninhabited worlds in the solar system. Veltar argued that both species could coexist if humans would be reasonable and accept the reality of Cathara technological superiority. Cooper looked at the alien who had tried to enslave his species and gave humanity's answer in words that would be remembered for generations. He said that humans had learned an important lesson about the price of trust, and they would never make the same mistake again. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, and no mercy for those who had tried to deceive humanity with false promises of peace. Cooper shot Veltar before the alien could activate his device, then ordered his team to continue destroying everything they could find. The message was clear. Humanity would not accept any Cathara presence in their solar system, and they would fight to the death rather than live under alien domination. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the lunar base and the annihilation of the Cathara fleet. Not a single alien ship was allowed to escape, and no prisoners were taken except for those needed to provide information about other Cathara operations. The cost to humanity was enormous. More than half of Earth's remaining population had died in the final battle, and much of the planet's infrastructure lay in ruins, but humanity had survived as a free species, and they had learned lessons that would shape their future for generations. The gifts of peace had been replaced by the tools of war. Earth rebuilt itself not as a paradise but as a fortress, with every human child raised to understand that survival in the galaxy required constant vigilance and the willingness to fight for freedom. The Cathara technology that remained on Earth was studied and reverse-engineered but never trusted. Humans developed their own versions of alien devices, always ensuring that they could not be used against their creators. The energy systems, medical treatments, and agricultural improvements were redesigned from the ground up using human engineering principles. Within a decade, Earth launched its first generation of interstellar warships, built using lessons learned from both Cathara technology and human innovation. These ships carried a message for any other species that might consider humanity an easy target. The message was simple and direct. Humans had tried peace once, and they had not liked how it ended. The galaxy would learn that Earth's children were not victims waiting to be harvested. They were predators who had been awakened by betrayal, and they would never again trust promises of friendship from strangers among the stars. The age of human innocence was over, replaced by an era of vigilance, strength, and the absolute determination to remain free. Humanity had paid for this knowledge with billions of lives and the destruction of their first golden age. But they had learned the most important lesson any species could learn. In a universe full of predators, the only peace that mattered was the peace you could defend with fire.